Everyone needs a roof. It's AI resistant. Private equity, statistically the smartest investors are buying roofing companies like crazy. Strategy in the roofing game is to network and be community involved. And my biggest competitor, private equity, isn't going to network and be community involved. And I love to network and be community involved. What I learned is I would so much rather invest in the local Austin ecosystem than pay Meta or Google, even, they have enough money. And so what we've done is I set my budget for 20, and pretty much all of it is going towards sponsoring events for other local small businesses and being involved in the community, because that's how we're going to beat private equity, and it's the right thing to do.
Welcome to the Roofing Success Podcast, your go-to source for insights and inspiration to achieve ultimate success in your roofing business. I'm your host, Jim Aline, the co-author of Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors and the best-known roofer, and the co-founder of Roofer Marketers. As part of the leadership team for the Roofing and Solar Reform Alliance, I'm here to bring you the best from the industry. In each episode, I sit down with top industry leaders to dive into their strategies and valuable lessons to help you find success in roofing. Nick Riley, how are you today?
Great, Jim. How about you?
Good, man. Driftwood Builders down in the greater Austin area. This has been a journey for you, Nick. You've been, this is you've had a journey, and not the traditional journey that most roofing contractors have, most roofing business owners have. So let's talk about your story. How did you get into roofing?
Awesome. Yeah, great question, Jim. And first off, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. As someone who's 7 months new to roofing, I listen to every single episode's podcast. It's been so helpful. So yeah, just a little bit about me. I come from a family home services background. So this is my great-grandfather, Nicholas Lapina, who I was named after. He came over to New York, and he was a plumber, and he was so poor he couldn't afford gloves, so he would tighten all the, pipes. So this bare hands, and he had
oh, wow.
Yeah, oven mitts for hands. And then, so I grew up in Montana, and my dad owned a landscape construction company, and my uncle owned a masonry company. And we also built a lot of houses and did the roofs on those houses as well. And so the thing about Montana is that they don't subcontract their labor like in Texas. And so the kids become, the laborers. And so, I worked for my dad in the summer and then my uncles in the winter, and they each had 6 kids, and I was the hardest worker of all, 12. And so I got assigned most of the work. And so growing up in Montana, in that background, it taught me the value of hard work. It's a great background. We got very fortunate to work on some awesome clients like Drew Bledsoe, Johnny Depp, Kiefer Sutherland, and a bunch of really, cool clients in Whitefish, Montana. But at the same time, it very, very much motivated me to go to college, get really good grades, so I don't have to be in the blue collar trades. And so I graduated from the University of Montana with high honors and 2 degrees. And I did 9 years of strategy consulting for KPMG and then Deloitte, also became a licensed CPA. And kind of halfway into it, I was just like, this isn't for me. I guess I grew up in a small business family, so I've always really loved business. I'm a huge business nerd. In my free time, I read business books, listen to business podcasts, watch business shows. Or I guess so when I did have free time before being a business owner.
Yeah.
And just working with corporate America, made me fall out of love with business. I was very fortunate to work on some really cool clients like Meta and Google and Tesla. And, in that situation, your customer is, a chief executive for a Fortune 100 company, and you give them strategic consulting advice on how to make more money. And it's there's no meaning to that. They already have enough money. And so I really, started to miss, the home services and helping everyday people. And so 4 years ago, I found out about this thing called entrepreneurship through acquisition. It's essentially where you buy existing companies. And I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. So I delved into it a little bit, and I saw that statistically speaking, when you buy an existing company, the default rate on SBA loans is only 5%. So around 95% of the time it works out. But inversely correlated to that, when you start a new business, 90% of new businesses fail in 3 years. And so I thought that was an interesting statistic. And then the second thing that kind of attracted me to buying existing businesses, I had a lot of friends who grew up in Montana and they did it, and it always worked out really well for them. And then kind of the third thing is like, I had known a lot about like private equity and I know that, over the last 100 years, the highest performing asset class is Bitcoin. I guess it was Bitcoin so far.
Was, yeah.
Yeah. But I know the private equity comes in second, on average 33%, IRR and investing the benchmark most people use is the S&P 500, which is 10%. So I knew that private equity does really well. And that's kind of their business model to buy existing businesses. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll buy an existing business. And so for 3 years, I didn't have enough money to buy an existing business. So I just aggressively saved and just learned as much as I could. And then about a year and a half ago, I started my search and I looked at about 2,000 businesses. And I got super, super fortunate to buy this great roofing company, Driftwood Builders Roofing in Austin, Texas.
What was your search criteria?
Yeah, great
What were you
question. So
looking for?
So
Yeah.
I was looking for like EBITDA around a certain amount. My like industry was pretty agnostic. And we hit a health and fitness. And so I thought that would be a good opportunity since I come from a home services background and everybody has a home. I thought the blue collar trades could be a huge opportunity, especially since they're not very sexy. And then I was just looking for honestly like a really honest seller that I trusted and a really good brand.
Mm.
That's at the end of the day, when you buy a small business, the seller knows 100 times more about it than you ever will. And so, I'm a huge, quantitative person. I create, Excel models with 50 tabs, but at the end of the day, find the seller I trusted was the number one thing.
That's really intriguing to say that because that makes a lot of sense because um, there's that adage, what is it? Numbers, is it people lie, numbers don't, but that's
Yeah.
not always the truth, right? Like
Yeah.
you can, there are ways to make numbers appear as if they were better than
Well,
than
yeah,
they
it's
are,
very, it's
right?
very easy to do. Yeah.
And then also having someone that um that you feel is being honest in the transaction and knowing that they're honest in the transaction tells you something about or would tell me something about how they operated their business, right? Because you want someone that did good for their customers, right? That served their customers on a high level. And if you feel like they're being honest and open with you, I think you could extrapolate that, right,
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
how much they cared about their team, how much they cared about their customers, how much they cared about the business itself, which would I could see that having a big impact that the numbers wouldn't show.
Oh, yeah, yeah, 100%, Jim, you hit the nail on the head with that. Yeah, I mean, like, my, like, thinking was at the same exact, like, if this, person has great integrity and treats me well and has been honest with me, then most likely, they're also treating their customers really well, which gets out, so referrals
Yeah.
down the road and great reputation. They're also treating their employees well. They're also treating our partners really well. So it's been a huge part for us. But yeah, and like, I mean, like, one of the things is like, I really trusted the seller. He's a great guy. And there was 3 existing salesmen, who I'd never met. And, he told me like all the guys have agreed to stay for at least 1 year after the acquisition. And like listening to a bunch of business buying podcasts, I'd heard horror stories where like someone buys a
Oh, yeah.
business and everybody leaves. And since they're all 1099, like the risk in this business was significantly higher, than most businesses. And it was like since I trusted the seller, I trusted that, his guys would leave right away, which
Yeah.
ended up being true, fortunately.
I wanna talk about a little bit about your time with KPMG and Deloitte. That is that's a universe that small business owners don't really understand. What does a Deloitte do? Like, you hear of Deloitte and KPMG and all these big strategic consulting firms. What did you execute on a daily basis when you were consulting these Fortune 100 CEOs and executive teams? What What do you look for? What were some of the things that you were helping them strategize around?
Yeah, great question. So I started out on IT audit, and then I did process improvement. I worked on a lot of growth strategy for life sciences and companies. Sorry. In the last 4 years, I ended my career. I consulted the team at Meta on the data of privacy, and that was a lot of mostly
Mm,
process improvement. But like most of the things we do is essentially as consultants, like take an outside in perspective and look at a business and try and see how we can improve their processes. And, kind of when someone is in a business like day to day, obviously they're very, subjective and like feel like the way things should be and the best ideas. And so like a lot of times like having a third party who has no emotional involvement to that, come in and look at the data, and give them a recommendation, that's really helpful a lot of times. But yeah, like I guess like a lot of the things that like Deloitte is famous for is like hypothesis testing. So let's just say like you're my customer, and I'm your consultant. And the problem is like we need to figure out how we can grow this roofing podcast. All right. And so like we have a bunch of ideas like, okay, maybe we can grow it, through social media. Maybe we can grow it, by sending out postcards. Maybe we can grow it by trying to go viral. Maybe we can grow it by cold calling. Like we have all these like, different ideas. Is kind of how we start engagement. And then we develop like hypotheses using the scientific framework, and then we quickly test those hypotheses to find out what works and what doesn't. And so again, examples like when I was a consultant for Meta and we did the data like integration, like we had to migrate like 5,000 pieces of data, and it was my job to figure out like what the best way to do that is. And so I started out by conducting a bunch of research, talking to, compliance, IT, tech, software engineers, legal, trying to find the best way to do this. And then after about a month of research, I come up with like hypothesis. I think this process is the best way to migrate this data. And then we have 5,000 pieces of data and we just start on 100. Like we just start small and we test
mm.
the hypothesis. Like, is this the best way? And then we test it on like 100 pieces of data. And then we quickly find out, all right, like, these things work, these things didn't work. And then we like reiterate the process and test again.
So I've heard it, over the years that like companies like Deloitte and KPMG, they have their they do it. They have a fantastic training in around these things. Like they really help to you, like they train you to do this for companies very well. How would a small business owner, like if they have to look at this themselves, how can they take some of those, like let's think about like a process that they can use to kind of consult themselves, right? Like how can they break apart their business in a certain way to test the process and refine a process or test hypotheses that they're having? What would you like now that you're the roofing business owner? What are you doing on an ongoing basis while the fires are coming at you
Yeah.
and all this stuff, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and without the checkbook of these large corporations,
Yeah.
and and so like how could we take those principles that you learned and executed on over the years and help a small business owner apply them? What would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. So I'll give you an example. So like when I first took over this business, I was, trying to get more leads. I think that's a problem that everybody has. And so I ran the like analysis, and in the past, like our biggest marketing spend was postcards, and postcards achieved a ROAS of 8.5. So for every $1 we spent on postcards, we brought in $8.50 in revenue. And so that served as like our benchmark. And then so I came in with like 10 new ideas, that I'd sourced from like other companies and listening to podcasts and books and other company business owners. And I was like, all right, 8.5 ROAS is a numbers to beat. Let's test all 10 ideas at once and we'll see like, does this is the ROAS for the new idea higher or lower than the 8.5?
Mm,
Because that's like the benchmark to beat. And so with roofing company like owners, I think like one great thing they can do is just test like different versions of their marketing. So like for us, like postcards are big. And so I created like 3 different postcards, and like we're gonna, trying to send them to the same location, each month. And then after a while, like we're gonna figure out, okay, which postcards like perform best. And that is kind of a long process. But one thing we can do is you can use social media to test a lot of your marketing before you actually spend it on marketing. So we
Mm.
use this app called Social BU, and be like post on social media, and you could like schedule in advance. And so I'll have different marketing ideas, and I'll post them on social media at the same exact time, like Monday at 6 p.m. And then I can see how many likes each of them gets. And so let's say like idea number one, like it gets like 50 likes. And then idea number two, it gets like 10 likes. And then idea number three, it gets like 2 likes. Then I can say, okay, like based off the social media, like responses, I think idea number one was the best marketing idea. So I'm going to take idea number one and I'll test it out on my postcards. So that's a long-winded answer for it. And then I think another
Yeah.
idea is just running a survey of like your past customers. So like a lot of companies will pay for surveys, because like you can do a bunch of research, and like you mentioned before, like you can make the numbers out to like tell a story, and like you can like manipulate data to a certain extent. But like, people usually tell the truth, especially in studies like where they're not, like they have no incentive to be dishonest. And so like a lot of corporations, they run customer surveys. But I think like one of the simplest things that small business owners can do is just, like email their customers and be like, hey, like, can you tell me like what we can do better? Or like after every time a job closes, I
Yeah.
call them and ask them like, hey, like, do you have any feedback for me? And so like one example that we got is like when I initially bought this company, I had thought about, what are there like additional revenue streams we could add. And my initial hypothesis was that it would be commercial roofing, since like we already do roofing. And then I just had, talked to multiple customers, and they said, do you guys do siding? Like we want the same company to do our siding and roofing. And then I just heard that from our customers over and over and over again. And I was like, all right, like we're doing siding now. Like, yes,
Yeah.
like the customers are always right, like at the end of the day.
Let the customers guide you to the answer, right? I
Yeah,
was just
exactly.
I was just on a Roofing Strong Alliance call, and we were talking about something like this. We were talking about some wins that people had, and one of the owners was talking about the culture shift that they had in their business, and they did a lot of cool stuff around their mission and and expressing that to their team. But the way they got to a little bit of it, like kind of what their new tagline and mission was they went back and analyzed all of the reviews that they got over like they took all of their Google reviews and threw them into the LLM and said, what are customers saying? Like, why are customers choosing us? What are they
Yeah.
expressing as to why they're choosing us? And they made a shift to turn that into culture. Right? So now like the things that they found there, like that was like their quick survey is what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that was like, oh, these people have already expressed something. Let's take what they've expressed and try to extrapolate something from it. Um, I think a survey would be a great thing. The post job follow-ups are probably a very underutilized, are probably
Yeah.
an extremely underutilized aspect, um, or technique that someone can use or tactic that someone can use to gather intelligence about what's going on the job site. Now let's go into a couple of other angles because you're a CPA, you have the finance, you can look. What would you look at? Like now we went from the front end, right? We talked about, okay, this is where we're looking at on the marketing side. Like these are some easy tests. What would you or what have you tested on the other end? Like we're looking at the P&L, we're looking at our COGS, we're looking at our labor, our materials, or something like that. Like our collections, our AR, you know what I mean? Like, what are some things? How would you take that same strategy and implement it in something like around an aspect on on that side of the business?
Oh, yeah, great question. So one of the things they teach us in consulting is to run a cost benefit analysis, which essentially like how much does this cost and how much is a benefit. And so for small business owners, like I think everyone should do that. Like I think you should number one, like look at like your marketing spend. And I think you should come up with a metric that you like, whether it's like return on ad spend or just like profit from this spend, and get a number like for every dollar I spent, I made X amount of revenue. Or in my opinion, the best thing to use is like profit on ad spend, like POAS. I'll make it up right now. Like what is my profit from the thing I spent? And then quickly see like, this worked, this didn't. And then I think like when you look at your expenses, yeah, I think every owner should do like a detailed like look in QuickBooks and kind of look at like, what am I spending honey on, and what are like my biggest things I can cut or biggest things I can like integrate. Whereas like instead of spending money on 5 different platforms, I'm spending money on one platform. And like you said with ChatGPT, like if you're a business owner, you could take a step back and be like, okay, well, what are the things like I need, to use? And then you could like type this into ChatGPT or any other AI source and be like, all right, can you find me the best CRM or the best technology that does these three main things? And I think it'd probably get you, a significantly better, um, you know, return than what you're currently using. And then, so yeah, so like one example, that kind of like we have implemented at Driftwood is the gutter company that we use. So in the past, we'd use this gutter company called the Brothers That Do Gutters, and what they gave us is they gave us a contractor price. And so they sent us a price, and then they'd like mark it down, so a couple $100. And then every time we use them, we'd make a couple $100. And then I'm a huge like referral partner. Like I love finding so referral partners. So I found this other cutter company, like Advanced Seamless Rain Cutters, who are amazing. And they said like, hey, like we can send you high quality leads. And I was like, okay, like that's much more important than you making a couple $100. And so over the
Mm.
last like 3 months, like we've used them instead of the old gutter company. And then like, last week I told my team about it, and I was like, all right, well, like how many jobs have we done over the last 3 months since making the switch that have used gutters? And it's like 5 jobs. And it's like, okay, well, on average, how much money did we make from the old gutter company by getting the contractor price and marking it up? And it's like, all right, well, $300. All right, so 300 times 5, because we've switched gutter companies, we've missed out on $1,500. All right.
Yeah.
Now, so that's the cost. So what's the benefit? Okay, well, they've sent us 2 referrals. One, I was able to sell this guy's roof for $10,000 in profit. And then he also has 3 more roofs on his property in Terrytown. So I think I'll sell those as well. And then my salesman, then we got another lead from them, and my salesman and Chris, Chris in North Austin, who's amazing, was able to sell that for an $8,000 profit. And it's like, all right, by making the switch overall, like we've lost out $1,500, from not being able to mark it up, but we've gained $18,000 in profit from these new referrals. So like overall, like from a long-term perspective, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. And that's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Like those, like that's a big difference, but you wouldn't know that unless you tested it, right? Like unless you said, okay, what I wonder if we're really like, if this is the best we can do to optimize revenue through this opportunity, right? Through
Yeah.
gutters. Like, okay, how do we let's think about some ideas. Oh, well, what if we found a company that referred back to us versus we can't do a contractor based price on which one? Like just going through the exercise of it. Now, you could have found out something else. You could have
Yeah.
found out that they just didn't refer you, but they said they would.
Yeah.
And then you could be
Yeah.
like, well, let's go back to the making our $1,500, right? Like, um, but like one of my favorite things is phase one, do something. Phase one or phase two, do something better than that. Phase three, do something better than that. So you're like, nothing is set in stone. You're always iterating, right?
Yeah.
And so as you are looking at what to iterate from where are you looking now? Because you have the whole business to look at. What order are you optimizing? What order are you taking to, um, or how are you making the decision? Hey, let's improve this versus that, because there's always a lot to improve. What are you thinking about in that manner? How are you thinking about that? Before we carry on with the episode, let's give a shout out to one of our sponsors. Roofers, let's get real. You're great at building roofs, but are you great at building a steady stream of leads? That's where Job Nimbus Marketing comes in. They know the roofing industry inside and out, and they'll help you dominate Google, Facebook, reputation management, and everything in between. If you want more quality leads, more booked jobs, and more growth, visit the link in the description or the sponsors page on the Roofing Success Podcast website. I talk to contractors every day that feel stuck. Not because they're not working hard, but because they're missing the structure to growth without chaos. Or their culture's falling apart because their team's unclear, unaligned, or just burned out. And when change hits, they're reacting instead of leading because time and priorities aren't under their control. Day 41 Thrive helps to fix that with proven strategies for growth, culture, and leadership that actually work. Ready to thrive beyond the storm? Visit the link in the description or visit the Roofing Success Podcast website on the sponsors page to start your journey today. There's no reason you're seeing our sponsor Coast pop up all over the roofing industry right now. Roofing businesses that use Coast can save an average of 1.5 days on their monthly book closing process. So if you use QuickBooks, Sage, or NetSuite, your Coast transactions can sync directly to those platforms. But the real game changer is the fraud protection. With Coast's telematic integrations, GPS is used to make sure that the truck is actually at the pump before the transaction goes through. If the truck isn't there, the transaction doesn't go through. Click the link in the description and see how Coast can level up your business. The Coast Visa commercial credit card is issued by Celtic Bank, subject to credit approval. Results may vary. Because there's always a lot to improve. What are you thinking about in that manner? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, great question. So I guess like the first thing I think like I did is look at our current business and what's our situation. And like, I mean, like at a high level, like there's a million things every business owner could improve. Like at a high level, you have like your internal processes and then you have like your external, leads you get. And like the team I bought, like as a combined 97 years of experience, and all of our sales guys have been here for at least 12 years. And my office manager, Christina, is amazing. So our processes are, pretty good. And so like for my specific business, I'm like, all right, like my number one focus is just trying to get high quality leads and test out these different marketing ideas. And I think one of the really tricky things is like prioritizing short term versus long term. Cause like every single business owner like can work on a million different things. But at a high level, there's two things. You can work in the business, so you're going out selling roofs, which is great in the short term. Like it's pretty fun. And then like the other thing you could do is like, go out and develop strategic partnerships and test marketing ideas and add new revenue streams working on the business. And so it's like this trade-off. And so it's like this kind of funny example is like in roofing, since January is really slow, I was like, January is gonna be my networking month. And so I picked up the phone like a madman. I drank a bunch of Diet Coke. I just called every insurance agent, every realtor, every property manager in Austin, Texas. And overall, it went well. I mean, I had what I would consider positive conversations with over 100 real estate agents and 20 insurance agents using the Matt Danskin technique.
Yeah.
But during January, we only sold a single roof. So our revenue for the month of January was $12,000. And so my dad called me. He's like, how's it going? I was like, I don't know. Good and bad. Yeah. So, yeah.
This is, yeah. And so like, instead of going out and getting a deal today, you're like, I want to structure these long-term relationships, which we talked about is that, as you were even looking business to business, like some businesses have more recurring style revenue, some are more project based, where, you do the job and it's over. And we talked about how you were focused on at creating a more recurring model, right? And so that's what you did there. You made the phone calls. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Like, um, you know, what what was your thought process when you were looking at first you looked at let's talk about first how you analyzed the roofing industry as a whole. Like, man, this looks good to me because of. Let's talk about that. And then this looks like it has challenges because of. And I think that's where the recurring revenue from our conversation kind of fit in when we were talking before. But what looked good about buying a roofing company?
Yeah, great question. So, like this roofing company came for sale. I met with the owner, super, super great, honest guy. I really trusted him. And I was like, okay, like now it's time to do like some research on the roofing market, overall. And so consultants are famous for asking, like really good questions. I don't think we ask any, I don't think that's true, but some people know us for asking questions. And there's a million things you can ask, but like my favorite question of all time is, what do I know to be true? Like in life, I
Mm,
constantly have all these ideas. I think this will work. I think that will work. I had this hypothesis, but it's like, what do I know like that's true? And so I looked at the roofing industry and I see that like private equity firms are buying these roofing companies like crazy. And I was like, okay, like, I know that private equity has achieved, a 33% IRR over the last 100 years. Like they're incredibly smart. Like they know how to invest. So that was the first, like, okay, I know private equity is buying these firms. And then the second thing is I was like, okay, well, I know everyone has a house. Or I guess most people, live in houses. I know that most of those houses have roofs that need to be replaced. And then the third thing that I knew to be true is I was like, okay, well, this seems incredibly AI resistant. Like at places like Deloitte and KPMG, a lot of my friends are starting to get laid off or, not promoted. Things are slow in there with AI. And so I was like, okay, roofing is incredibly AI resistant. And then I kind of started to, try and research, okay, like what, there's a lot of different things that works in roofing. What is like the tried and true strategy? And like, I think back in the day, it was networking. Sorry, I think back in the day, it was door knocking. I think right now, like the tried and true strategy is networking. And then kind of like kind of to piggyback off that, like point 4A, we'll say, is like every business has pros and cons. And so the roofing, like at a high level, the pros are the unit, economics are great, but the cons are like there's 0% recurring revenue or for most roofing companies. But like going back to like the strategic partnerships and that networking, like if you network, and you develop that like a relationship and that insurance agent sends you, 5 roofs a year, then like you don't have to go knock on 2,000 doors. Like you have to go on LinkedIn and reach out to 200 strategic partnerships. And then the last and most important thing is I was like, wait a minute, private equity isn't going to network and private equity isn't going to be community involved. And so I thought about it and I was like, okay, so just to recap, like everyone needs a roof. It's AI resistant. Private equity, statistically, the smartest investors are buying roofing companies like crazy. The winning strategy in the roofing game is to network and be community involved. And my biggest competitor, private equity, isn't going to network and be community involved. And I love to network and be community involved. Like, this is perfect.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And then so now that you are and you're going in that direction, that's the recurring revenue model. It's the one to many, right? That's where I think it gets overlooked a lot. The relationships that you build and we think about asking for referrals from our past customers or from at the end of a build or, right there on the spot. But these are relationships that, like you said, that insurance agent, they're really the insurance company might get um, courted by private equity to use
Yeah,
them, right?
yeah,
But the CEO of the private equity firm may go have lunch with the CEO of State Farm, you know what I mean, and say, hey, we
yeah,
should, but
yeah,
they
exactly.
can't. But it's still those individual agents,
Yeah.
the people that people are dealing with, right? And it's the people that people trust. They're insurance agents, they're realtors, they're all of that. Is that so? Was your strategy just like, hey, doing the Matt Dansky method, we're going after it, like that's what we're going to create a referral machine out of this? How did you think about it? And do you have something that you do on an ongoing basis, not just that one time made a lot of phone calls? Or
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, like, just to go back, so, like, with, like, networking, like, when I was in college, people would always tell me, like, "You have to network, like, your network, like, determines your network your net worth," and, like, honestly, at first, I, like, was, like, disgusted by it. I was like, "This is just people using people, like, this is gross, this is super, like, transactional, like, I'm not, like, no, screw this, like, I'm not gonna do that." And then so I got this job, lined up after college. And so I had to make the 24-hour drive from Montana to Southern California. And so I love books. And so I Googled like best business books. And the number one business book that Google like suggested at the time was a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi,
Mm,
which I highly encourage. And so Keith Ferrazzi started his career at Deloitte, which I ended up working for. And then he came from this blue collar family, so he had a lot of similarities to me. But I read that book on the drive down, and it was like life changing because kind of like Keith Ferrazzi kind of knocks out like two things. He talks about it's not networking, it's just like having friends. Like my best friend from high school lives in Austin. If he broke down on the road right now, like I would go help him out. And like friends help each other out, some like more than others, but like it's not about using people, it's not about networking, it's just like friends help each other out and people like to do business with people they know. And then the second thing, and I think bigger picture thing is that he talks about how like, there's this question, does money buy happiness? And, there's there's been a lot of research, on that. And, there's studies show that like money does to a certain extent, help with happiness. It doesn't guarantee happiness, but it definitely helps. But money was a number two predictor of happiness. But the number
mm,
one predictor of happiness was what's the quality of your long term relationships. And so I think like networking and like developing friends is great because like number one, not only does it help with business and like the more friends the better, but two, I think like most importantly from like a high level, just like basic human happiness 101, like having high quality friendships is the number one predictor of long term success in human beings. And so like that was one of the the biggest things that stood out to me. And so I know that was like a long winded tangent, but I just want to throw it in. But yeah, back to your question. So I think one thing that like we're specifically doing to network, with like people on a recurring basis, is just kind of cold emails and follow ups. Like it's not the sexiest thing to do, but I'm a huge believer in like calendar blocks. And so kind of every Friday, for 2 hours, I just get on the phone, pick up the phone and start dialing. Sometimes having a Diet Coke helps when you're tired. But I think those things, so that's one of the basic things. One of the cheat codes that I think people can use is instantly AI. So what I did is I went into Apollo and I downloaded the data for every email address for real estate agents in Austin. And then I had an offshore resource on Upwork create 10 email accounts for Driftwood Builders Roofing. And so each AI agent like responds as like a person. And so I have like 10 Driftwood AI,
okay.
and then I feed this data from Apollo to instantly, and these 10 AI agents reach out to, every realtor in Austin. And then if we get a positive response, then it gets routed to me, and then I call them and say, "Hey, Maya from my team, said you're interested in connecting."
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that was so yeah, I guess like at a high level to sum up, like one is like cold calling, super basic, but it works, and then the second is like the AI agents for email, and works great too.
But it's also going back to that core principle of just the relationship, right? And so,
Yeah,
and relationships don't, to me, relationships don't just like come. You have to put in work. So you're putting in the work. I love that you're now using some efficiency using AI to then say, oh, now I have these, I have these agents working, they're sending emails, they're responding to emails, and then they're letting me know when someone is, when someone has responded positively and would be willing to meet or would be willing to have a conversation. What's some of the like copy that you're, what's the conversation that you're having? How is the, how are, what's the introductory text? Like, are you saying, hey, we'd love to do your roof. Can we do a roof? Can you refer us to a client? How can you refer us now? Or how are
yeah.
you like, how are you introducing Driftwood and yourself to kind of build a relationship from?
Yeah, so like we take this exact opposite approach. So like when I started off, you reach out to, hey, like, can you send me your FRPs or like, so what I did like before doing the Matt Danskin thing was like walk in the insurance agent's office, hey, here's some donuts, send me some referrals. And it's like that doesn't work, and I can't believe I did that in the first place. But what we do is we start off by being generous, and so we reach out to real estate agents, and we're like, hey, like we'd love to sponsor your events. Like, can we help you? And so we reach out and our approach
Mm,
is, so I guess I started off 7 months ago. And at first, I was trying these 10 different ideas, paying third party marketing. And then, I failed at a lot of that and learned from my mistakes. But like what I learned is like, I would so much rather invest in the local Austin ecosystem than pay Meta or Google, even, like they have enough money. And so what we've done is like I set my budget for 2026, and pretty much all of it is going towards sponsoring events for other local small businesses and being involved in the community, because that's how we're going to beat private equity, and it's the right thing to do. And so I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, like we set our budget. Can we sponsor your events? Can we help you? And so I think the number one thing in networking is like be generous. And the con to that is that unfortunately, like some people are going to take advantage of you and some people are not going to play nice. So I'll give you an example. Like we started off with that approach, and there's like a real estate agency in Austin, and they're like, hey, could you sponsor an event? It's $500. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And so you pay $500, which for me is a lot of money. And then I go to their event, and I saw the office manager there, and she's like, saw me. She didn't say hi to me, like, which was weird. So I go up, I speak to her, and she was like, and I was like, hey, could you introduce me to the agents? And she's like, sure, I guess. And she introduced me to, like, one agent, and then she's like, yeah, I think they're busy. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And then I went and I was like talking to one of the other agents, and she was like, oh, like I already have a roofer. And so like when I was emailing the office manager back and forth, like I had asked her explicitly, like, do you guys have an existing roofing company? And she said no. But I guess some of the insurance agents did. So in that situation, they just took my $500, even though they probably already have another roofer. And that was disheartening. But I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of asymmetric bets. Like I love to take bets where it's like, there's a 1 in 3, there's, most likely I'm gonna lose. There's a 1 in 10 chance I'm gonna win, but it costs $1, and if I win $100. So go back from cost benefit analysis, and so that was like disheartening that they just took my $500. But I was like, you know what? I got to keep making these asymmetric bets. And then we had a second real estate group that we sponsored. And like, once again, it was $500, and then we go sponsor their event for their dog. And then we meet them. They're amazing, amazing people. And since then, they've, given us a lot of high quality referrals. And last week, so we got a referral from them, and I was able to sell it for a $62,000 roof for around like $30,000 in profit. And so,
Yeah.
I think in that situation, like unfortunately, not everyone's going to play nice. Some people, won't take advantage of you, which sucks. But like, you just gotta, hang in there for the long term and believe in your strategy long term, and make as many asymmetric bets as you can and keep going.
And that's true with I guess, sales activity, right?
Yeah,
Like you're always not every prospect turns into a closed job, right?
yeah,
Like, so not every relationship that you try to build, sometimes you sometimes you just don't click, right?
yeah, exactly.
Sometimes sometimes they have someone that they already use, but if you continue to maintain or nurture that relationship, that that person, that company might drop the ball one day.
Yeah, definitely.
Guess who's there? And
Yeah,
then and so, or even in a little bit of a kind of a softer way. I know you guys are working on like building out the YouTube channel and you've been building out content, right? So now you have reasons to just just be in their ecosystem, right? Like when you're building out content, how have you guys looked at how are you continuing communication with these relationships? Because, like, not every realtor does a lot of deals either,
yeah,
just
definitely.
so we know. Like, how are you focused on staying top of mind to these referral partners that you're building?
Yeah, great question. So there's two ways to do that. One is just set like an email campaign where like, every 3 months, like we just send them an email and check in with them. I send handwritten headers sometimes, but that's usually to the top agents because it's time consuming. And then, yeah, and then just like, so phone calls. Yes. Like I said, like every Friday, I block off 2 hours and I just grab my phone and, I just call the top agents. Hey, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Like, if you need a free roof inspection, like, please let me know. And so, yeah, so just set like calendar, like, so reminders is big. And then like with these, like we can upload it to our CRM, like go high level, and it will like we can text and email them from that, and it will show us like the last time you made contact with them. And so it's like, it's we have like 200 like realtors we're trying to reach out to, and so it's like, we'll do like batches of 20 like every week. I just call 20, and just to stay top of mind. Hey Jim, I think you're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
I am on mute. Thanks for
Yeah.
telling me. I mute myself every now and then. We'll they can edit that out. Um, I do wanna talk about your YouTube channel a little bit because you're doing a lot of cool stuff over there too, and you're following the they ask you answer style of content creation, and you're getting some views. Like,
Yeah.
you're not going viral in the
No.
way that, like a Mr. Beast would think,
Yeah.
but how has that how when did you start on your YouTube strategy and what did that like how have you been thinking about it and what how has it been going?
Yeah, so, we just started really, like, recently. I guess, like, I have, been taking, videos and, like, uploading them, for the last couple months. But, recently, like, last week, I just sat in here on a Sunday and took, like, a million videos, and I have a resource from Upwork, like, work on those.
Yep.
And so that is, like, very much, like, just started out. And so but, like, I guess there's a couple things why I think this is like a great opportunity. So like, I read the book They Ask You Answer, and I think it's, super, super interesting and I want to test it out. However, like, like I talked about making long-term asymmetric bets. This is like very, very, very much like a long-term thing. Like I think, it's going to take like
Yeah.
at least 6 months to a year. But the number one thing I love about this, well, I guess there's two things I love about it is like one is like it's free. So like from a cost benefit analysis, like you're on the job already. So like to take a phone and be like, hey, I want to explain this to you. I think like, it's literally free and it's super fun. And so I'm really excited to do it. I think it's gonna, take a long time to build out. But I think another thing that's exciting to me is like I think it essentially builds trust for two reasons. One is like the videos that people post, like you can go to their channel, but like we take videos, we upload the videos to Company Cam, and then Company Cam generates a transcript. And then I'll copy and paste that into ChatGPT, and I'll say, could you clean up the transcript, but also optimize it for SEO, AEO? And like as everyone
Yeah.
knows, like Google owns YouTube. And so, we started to get a couple leads that way. And so it's like kind of like, you know, two birds with one stone. And the kind of like another reason I love it is because like, we're known as like the local contractor and like a local expert, and like private equity isn't going to be doing this. And then so kind of back to what you were saying on like the Adam Pensman thing, where like everyone should look at their reviews and throw it in ChatGPT and see like what sticks out. So I heard Adam say the same thing, like huge fan of his podcast. Obviously not as good as this one, but good one. And I did that before I bought the company. And the number one thing that stood out was Driftwood's education. So the old owner,
Mm,
Todd Hunsiger, is the best roofer of all time. And I think now that he's kind of like so retiring, he's still staying on to mentor me and help me out. But he
that's awesome.
loves to teach. And that's part of the huge culture at Driftwood. Like on our reviews, a lot of people explicitly say like they educated me. And even though they're more expensive, like they took time, which is why I paid more for roof. And so I think that's like ingrained in the Driftwood culture. And even though there's been an ownership transition, like that is 100% going to stay the same. So yeah, I'm really excited to try out this YouTube thing. I don't know whether or not it will work. I'll follow up in a couple months, but like from my opinion, going back to like the cost benefit analysis thing, like, even if we don't get a bunch of leads from it, like it's free and it's fun. And then I think
Yes.
one way we can kind of help to build trust, regardless of whether or not it works, is like, let's say if a lead comes in and it's like a tire repair, we can go to our YouTube repository and find these 20 videos of tire repairs and then email it to the customer. And so like before, like even if we don't get leads from the YouTube channel, after we get leads, it's a guaranteed way to build trust. So like I've been doing that.
Yeah,
Like I get a lead and then like I send them, I'm like, here's like I try to explain it. And I'm actually just watch this YouTube video instead. And so my
that's
close
right.
rates have been a lot higher for that. So I guess
Eh,
like in the short term, long term, like sorry, I'm rambling, but like in the long term, will this get us a bunch of leads? I really hope so, but I can't give you an answer, but I'll follow up in a couple months. But for the short term, I think it really helps to build trust because like when leads come in, I just like send them these YouTube videos and like, oh, okay, like now I know what that is.
yeah, my friend Cody Landels has done a great job of that. He's been on the podcast recently. Um, so he'll send an intro video, right? With the with to the homeowner when the appointment is set, talking about the company and why they should choose them. Here's a tip for you is put them in playlists, right? So now they get to watch the next video and the next video and the next video.
Yeah,
So that's a secret one. You guys can reach out to Cody and he'll help you
he
out with all that type of stuff.
definitely
Um,
do that.
but and the strategy behind it and how he did it, but it's fantastic from a sales perspective, like not just from a lead generation perspective, but from a sales perspective, building that trust with homeowners. So I kind of want to like you have this long-term focus, right? And there's what are you finding are like the most underlooked at or undervalued aspects of a roofing business that you feel like you can put focus on to help in that long-term vision?
Yeah, so I think like a couple things of like why. So like in my opinion, I think being long term focus is the most underrated aspect in business. So my great aunt is 96 years old. She doesn't know anything about investing, but she outperforms 90% of hedge funds. And you're like, what? And it's like because hedge funds have the smartest people in the world. They work 100 hours a week. They have resources we don't have, and they probably insider trade and manipulate the market. Why is my great aunt beating them? And it's because the time frame. So hedge funds are short term focused. They get annual, they get measured, every 3 months. Whereas my aunt just buys like index funds, buy and hold. So she's long-term focused. And so like
Yep.
90% of the time index funds beat hedge funds, as I think long-term focus is the most underrated aspect in business. And to actually get to your question and talk about like specifically with roofing companies, like I think one thing is like everybody knows like the repair versus replacement dynamics. And like as a business owner, like, like I get it. Like I really want to pitch like the full replacements, but kind of like how I see it is I'm like, all right, well, do we suggest a repair replacement? Obviously, like we do the right thing, but it's like with a repair, we make $500. With a full roof replacement, we make 5,000, just say. But kind of like how I think of it is like we do the repair, we make $500 now. We get a good review, which is worth, we'll say $200, and then they're going to refer us to all their neighbors. And if they're then the probability then we sell full roof replacement from that is good. We're also going to put a yard sign in them. Sorry, in their, not in them, in their,
Yeah.
and then like, I just bought this business with a 10-year loan. And then like, most likely they're going to, live in that house. And then, in 7 years from now, when they do need a full roof replacement or they need siding or something else, like they're going to come back to us. And so, since Driftwood's been around, for almost 21 years, like that's something that the old owner has seen. Like, he's seen that in his career. Like, 17 years ago, I sold this repair. And then 6 years later, they came back to me and for the full roof replacement. And they also told all their friends, and I sold 10 full roof replacements in that neighborhood. So I think the repairs versus replacements is kind of one of the big things that long-term focus can help.
Yeah, and that's where, it gets challenging, in the, if you're looking quarter to quarter, month to
Yeah,
month, and, when you're doing that, we have sales reps that hate to run repairs, and we have to have that conversation,
yeah,
right? Like, you have to have that conversation, like, "Yeah, I get it.
yeah,
You'd rather run a replacement lead,"
yeah,
right? Like, of course, right?
yeah,
You'd rather get a bigger commission check, but
yeah,
if you create a good experience for that homeowner around that, there's so much opportunity for even more. It's the long-term value of a customer that we should
yeah.
be focusing on. Nick, this has been awesome, man. It's been great. Thanks for your time today. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Thank you for tuning into the Roofing Success Podcast. For more valuable content, visit roofingsuccesspodcast.com. While there, check out our sponsors for exclusive offers, shop for merchandise, and sign up for our newsletter for industry updates and tips. Also, join the Roofing Success Facebook group to connect with other professionals and stay updated on the latest trends. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Your support helps us continue to bring you top industry insights. The website link is in the description. Thanks for listening.